Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video, and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. Good afternoon, greetings to everyone watching this video. My name's Pete Ring and I'd like to welcome Dennis Rhino is his nickname, and that's what most people call him, Hume. So I'd like to welcome him to this video chat.
Thanks, Ringo.
Good on you. I'm looking forward to hearing about your Macchi ejection, which was rather a big event. And I read it a few times and I went, wow. So maybe we could just start by saying what sort of aircraft have you flown in what sort of aircraft have you flown in your career?
So I started the flying training on the CT4A air trainer and then off to the Macchi. I then flew the Mirage operationally. I became a flying instructor and instructed on the CT4 and the Macchi, and then did Hornet conversion. And after a tour on Hornets, I was back to instructing on the Macchi until I left the service.
Hey, good one. What did you...
Sorry, I did forget to say, after pilot's course, I did Mirage conversion and did a couple of tours on Mirages in Butterworth and Darwin.
Yeah, no, that's good. You got an extensive background in fighters. So what sort of aircraft did you eject from again? Just remind me.
It was a Macchi, the MB326H.
And you actually said goodbye to one of them. Who was involved in the ejection?
So I was the captain of the aeroplane and in the front seat, as it turns out, and in the back seat was then Flight Lieutenant Brendan Heslin. So he was a student at Central Flying School, and he was teaching me, in inverted commas, low-level navigation on the day of the event.
Okay, so you were the dummy.
Well, we referred to it more as blogs than the dummy, but yes, I was the pretend student.
Okay, no worries. What year was this?
1987.
And when the ejection occurred, what were you doing?
So we're just flying along at low level, and actually the cloud base was getting too close to the hills, and Brendan said, look, I'd stop instructing at this stage. It's too difficult for a student, which I thought was an eminently reasonable decision. So I took over and started flying, and then I could see ahead that the cloud was too close to the hill. I could still see past it, but we weren't going to be able to maintain our authorised height above the ground.
Okay.
So we climbed up to the next quadrantal level above safety height, which from memory was 7,500 feet. And I think the safety height was of the order of 6,200 or 6,300.
And where were you in relation to, say, Williamtown?
We were up near the Barrington Tops. We'd just passed Lake Dungowan, I think it was one of the waypoints that we'd seen. So it wasn't too far past that.
So that's northwest of Newcastle?
Northwest of Newcastle, 50 or 60 nautical miles.
Okay, good one. So keep going. So you...
So there we were. And obviously it was winter. It was the 3rd of August. The forecast freezing level was up at about 8,500 to 9,500 feet from memory. So, but I was cognizant of icing. So, I kept an eye out to see that we weren't showing any visible indications of icing.
So did the Macchi have a little bit of trouble with icing?
Yeah, it was don't fly in icing conditions, and didn't have any anti-ice facility on it, which always struck me as a bit weird for some aeroplane designed in Italy. Although the engine was British, it was a Viper. And I think the cabin altimeter had replaced a total air temperature gauge.
Ah,
In between where when I was on pilot's course, it had a total air temperature gauge, but later it was a cabin altitude gauge from memory. So didn't really have any instrumentation to help me along with that. So just kept an eye out. And the engine, I noticed that the engine was running down. And, I didn't have too much control of it with the throttle. And I did think of icing straight away. So I went into the de-icing procedure, which was to retard the throttle to 70% from memory. But the engine, sort of beat me to it and just ran down.
so the icing was pretty common in a Macchi because I never had that experience in jets, so I never had to worry about what you worried about. So
No,
the intakes would ice up, is that correct?
say again.
The engine intakes would ice up.
Yes, the engine intake iced up. Yep.
That's a big thing for a jet. I mean,
It's a big thing for a jet, yeah.
pretty thirsty for air, isn't it?
Yep, indeed. Yeah.
So keep going. So the engine decided to do its own thing.
Yeah, so it was sort of back at idle. So then as gently as I could imagine, I moved the throttle forward and I heard a couple of compressor stalls. And so I thought,
What
well,
did they sound like?
a pop, just a little pop, pop. Not particularly loud compared to, something with a much larger engine, but and so I shut the engine down and relit it, which was the engine icing procedure. And it did relight. And, of course, at this stage, we're now descending down. So from 7,500 feet down towards safety height. And I tried to move the throttle forward and really had no response from the throttle, except the EGT went very high. And I selected full throttle, and I think we had an EGT of about 800, which was way over the maximum of 600.
Wow.
No response from the engine. And I decided there's no sense really waiting till we get all the way down to safety height, and ordered and initiated the ejection.
Wow. Wow, that must have been when you're in that. We'll carry on a minute with the rest of it because it gets exciting shortly, or more exciting shortly for you.
Yeah, it does.
When you're faced with that ejection situation, what runs through your head?
Well, because I did have a bit of time, I'm thinking, have I screwed this up? Have I done something wrong? Is this all my fault? And so, you're sort of there wondering if you can recover the situation. And it gave me, a bit of a feeling for the people who fatally delayed ejection decisions. And I can sort of, you're sitting there and you can't believe what's happening. And you're wondering whether you've caused it and screwed it up, and is there some way of recovering the situation? But fortunately, I thought clearly enough, and no, I'm sorry, it's time to go, and we'll have to sort the rest of it out in the fullness of time.
That was good, mate, because I've spoken to a few people who ejected and the same thoughts ran through their head.
I'm sure there have been.
Can I fix what's happened?
Yeah.
And luckily you had maybe a bit more altitude under you, so maybe you had a little bit of time for that thought, but then you thought, nah. So what happened then? Well, how do you activate the seat?
Well, I jettisoned the canopy, so you can go through the canopy in the Macchi, but I thought we've got enough time, so I jettisoned the canopy. Before I did that, I said to Hezo, I'm going to jettison the canopy, and 2 seconds after that, you eject. And I sort of heard bang, bang, so Hezo's gone, and then I initiated my own ejection.
Okay. And how do you do that?
I used the face blind handle because I had enough time. It wasn't any critical time issue. And when I first went to grab it, I sort of, no, I'm leaning forward in the seat, which was something people often said people did with the face blind. But, so I jammed my head back in the seat and pulled the handle. And the next thing I remember, I was actually, floating in the air. The parachute had deployed, and I could see something dark disappearing into the cloud below me. So I don't have any memory of going up the rails or anything like that. So the next moment of consciousness for me was after the chute had deployed.
And maybe you did see the aircraft, as you said, disappearing down below you.
I've got a feeling it was actually the ejection seat separating.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I
okay,
saw. Yeah, I don't think I saw the aeroplane.
okay.
Yeah.
And so give us the adventure from there on.
Well, so the next thing that happened is the drogue bullet comes swinging towards my face, and I grabbed hold of it right in front of me. And I know I've seen, a few reports of ejections, and people always say the drogue bullet was going to whack me in the face. And people go, no, that's impossible. The length of the cord and so forth, it cannot happen. And I'm going, well, I can promise you it was going to whack me in the face. Anyway, so there I am, under the chute in quite a bit of pain, actually. I had a lot of back pain and also had pain in my mouth. I'd shattered a few teeth, as it turned out. And I was freezing cold. So I'm thinking to myself, it's Monday morning. I've just ejected. I'm freezing. I'm in a lot of pain and I'm over a subtropical rainforest. I bet you I get caught in a tree.
Ah,
And so, sometime later, I couldn't tell you just exactly how long it was going to be, but, it was whack, whack, whack. And there I am, slamming into a tree trunk with the top of the chute caught up in the upper branches.
so were you clear of the cloud on the way down, or did you come down some way through the cloud?
No, it was when I, hit the tree, I was still in cloud.
Oh, you're still in cloud.
Yeah, I didn't see anything
Ah,
until the very last moment.
so lucky it had the thought to some degree because at least it wasn't an entire shock.
Yeah, yeah,
So you're in cloud still, freezing
yeah,
cold and sitting in a tree, or
yep.
not hanging in a tree.
Well, I was just hanging underneath the chute, so I was just in the straps down the tree initially. So that was that, and then I rummaged around, bits of the survival pack and all that sort of thing to see if I could find anything of any use to me. Of some interest, the Williamtown Macchies had a tree escape system built into the chute, but the Central Flying School Macchies did not have that. So,
Wow.
so that was a bad thing. And I did manage to find a space blanket, which I didn't expect to have. And I climbed out of that. So it was quite windy too. So apart from being very cold, it was very, very windy, of the order of 40 knots. And I wanted to get out of the harness and, ensconce myself astride one of the branches, but I was very conscious of the fact that I could easily fall off, and that'd be bad.
So how high do you think you were above the ground?
Eventually, when I did get out of the harness and got onto the branch, I had a look down and I thought, I reckon I'm 30 feet high. And I had a bit more of a think about it. And I'm thinking maybe I'm overestimating. So I deployed the dinghy pack, which had a 15-foot lanyard. And I thought, yep, it's gone halfway. So, I managed to get halfway down. So I managed to get down to 30 feet off the ground.
So if you're actually in the you're in the harness there just a few seconds before now, and then you manage to get to sitting in a branch or on a branch.
Yep.
Was that within reach of you hanging in the chute, or were you already up against the branch?
No, I had to scramble around a bit and then step down onto it with another couple of branches, and then I sat on it. Yeah.
At that stage, you'd released yourself from your parachute harness.
Yeah, I released myself from the parachute harness. I'm just trying to think. I remember threading the drogue bullet and stuff through the G suit so that just in case I fell, I wouldn't fall all the way to the ground. Yeah, I would have had to get out of the parachute harness to get down to the branch. I did, yeah.
Wow. Did you climb trees as a kid?
Yeah, but not always so successfully. And yeah, yeah. It was, I was very cognizant of the fact that, having safely ejected, my dramas weren't over, and, any wrong decision making from now could, make the situation a hell of a lot worse.
So the drama may have just been starting.
Yes, yeah.
So,
I know
hey?
I know in more, I guess I've taken a bit of an interest in it, but if you just sit around in the chute harness for an extended period of time, of course, you stop the circulation and stuff to your limbs, and that can end up being fatal. So, yeah, my problems weren't over just yet. But anyway, I made the best of a bad thing, I think.
You kept your presence in mind.
Yeah, I did. Yep, yep. I was pretty happy about that. I also remember, and I met Barry Aarons a bit later, but I'd done combat survival course, and the only four things running through my mind were protection, location, water, food. He said, of combat survival course, this might be the only thing you remember, but please remember it. And protection and location were obviously of very significant importance to me. Water and food, much later down the track would be an issue. So, I did my best to think as clearly as I could.
That's a good way of summarising it. That you had those thoughts and that was what you focused on. So you wrapped the space blanket around you. Did that have much effect, or was it still pretty damn cold?
I don't know for sure, but I thought I'm going to put everything on I can now. We digress a little bit because when I'd left Amberley, it was 19 degrees Celsius and I was lightly sweating, as I was strapping in there. I realised I'd left my flying jacket in my helmet bag underneath the seat. And I'm thinking, I really should put it on. And, the famous last words in yourself were, "I shall be right." So, I ended up there just in a T-shirt and my flying suit,
Wow.
which was, of course, grossly underdressed. Even more annoying because I did a fair few snow sports, from sail up in the hills, skiing and cross-country skiing. And I was always, thoroughly dressed in winter, long john, flying suit and all this, flying jacket and so forth, but not this day. So anyway, there it goes.
Damn, that's unfortunate because I had the same thoughts when I was flying. I used to go out the same way, lightly dressed, and then someone said, "What happens if you spend the night around the Barrington Tops?" After that, I went out bloody long johns, flying suit.
Yeah, it is worth thinking. What happens if, it all comes a cropper now, especially, if it happens early in the morning, you might
Wow.
be rescued before sunset. But, if it happens in the afternoon, you could be there all night.
So you were now sitting in a tree with the space blanket around you, surveying the world and working out that protection is a bit, you'd done probably as much as you could, and then location was now a problem.
Yeah. So I got
Going from there.
the PRC 90 out. I think was the survival beacon we were using at the time, and turned it on to beacon. I probably should also mention that this aeroplane had, which I think was A79, A7079, had a VHF radio on it, and I declared a mayday to the flight service unit on VHF, and the TACAN just locked on before we ejected, so I'd given them my TACAN position before we ejected as well. And I subsequently found out that when we ejected, it transmits an emergency pulse, and that was detected by Williamtown Air Traffic.
Ah.
So they just got one bleep, and then, of course, no answer from us, and then, everything started ringing and bells going off and so forth. So they had that indication of where the aeroplane was when we ejected. They didn't get very many pings off it, but it did give them something.
So if you had have known they were receiving that, that would have been a little bit more comfort to you.
I guess it would have been, but yes. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you're still stuck in a tree.
Yeah, no, I'm still stuck up in the
in
tree,
front of you,
having a look down, and I didn't want to. So I guess it was about 40 minutes later, I'd say, I heard this almighty roar of a hornet, over the top. So I dialed the radio from beacon to voice and started talking, and Barry Kelly was the pilot of the Hornet, and Brendan Heslin had done the same thing. And he said it was like two guys speaking at full speed, full volume, with a pint of adrenaline up their bum each, so absolutely unintelligible to him. And so, he said, slow down, speak slowly. So
just as an aside, where was Brendan at this stage? Which you found out later.
We had been talking on the radio, and he'd managed. I can't remember whether we worked this out before or after the Hornet.
Doesn't matter, keep going.
Yeah, but we were about maybe not even as far as a nautical mile apart.
Wow.
He'd ended up in a camping ground, and he could see the parachute at the top of the tree, although he couldn't actually see me.
Wow.
He was also in a fair bit of pain, and he had a fracture in his spine that was possibly caused more by the landing than the ejection. I think it was what they called a burst fracture of his spinal cord. So he was in a fair bit of pain, and between us, it was just swamp and really marshy ground, bordering on impenetrable by foot. And he said, I don't think I can do anything for you. And I said, no, I don't think you can. You need a ladder and all this sort of stuff. So we're in communication with one another. We knew we were relatively well. And now it's just a matter of waiting for someone to come and grab us.
So now Barry Kelly's up there talking to you. Does this raise your morale?
Oh, I cannot, even though there's obviously, he cannot get me out of that tree. It raised your morale 1,000%. Yes. Yeah. Because, people are on the job and all that sort of thing. And you're aware that there's quite a capable search and rescue capability. So,
So tell us what you know of Barry Kelly now, not him personally. He's still around. I talked to him a little bit, but tell us what you know about Barry Kelly and what he was doing in the Horn at the same time he was talking to you.
Right. Well, really, this is an extraordinary feat of airmanship that I believe has not been properly rewarded. But so Barry was sitting in the 3-squadron crew room having a cup of coffee, and the CO, who was Wing Commander Bob Trudy Trelaw, calls him in and says, "A Macchi is ejected in the Barrington tops. I want you to scramble and go and get them, or go and find them."
Yeah.
Kills goes, "Gee, I hope they know where they were," and all that sort of thing, so that they ejected in time. So off he goes, and
well, you're a mate of Barry's.
Oh yeah, very good mate of him. Oh yeah, no, so
that makes a big difference too.
Well, it does. We have in fact revisited the site in subsequent years. So
keep going.
And so he scrambles the aeroplane and comes out to find us in icing conditions. Now the Hornet had a little bit of anti-icing capability, but again, as I say, 40 knots of wind, and he's doing a UHF DF to try to find Brendan and my position. And he'd left with a not complete alignment of the inertial reference system before he'd gone. Anyway, he pinpoints us and reports this to the search and rescue Iroquois.
Now, how did he pinpoint you?
Because on beacon mode, he'd done a UHF direction finding on our beacon, on our Perp 90s.
And that could put him right over the top.
Well, he got it within 3/4 of a nautical mile, which I think is an incredible achievement. Because both of them were going off, and he hadn't done a complete inertial nav system alignment. So so it got very close to where we were. Now the Iroquois, let me try to think. I think it was run by the National Safety Council at the time. It had come up to try to find us and couldn't get to us because of the cloud. So, we were too high up in the cloud. And eventually it only had enough fuel to get back to Williamtown with reserves and stuff. And it ended up landing in a paddock. Now, the Iroquois didn't know anything about, Latin long and stuff like this. I mean, they're just using maps to, travel around with. So Barry found the Iroquois visually and then used the inbuilt moving map display and his UHF direction finding to tell them where we were relative to them in, range and bearing, something that they could deal with. I struggle to believe, the demands on him trying to do that in those conditions are just incredible.
Yeah.
As a bit of a joke, I often put a little Facebook post on the anniversary of the ejection, and one of them I said, "Oh, it's the anniversary of the day I conducted Barry Kelly's instrument rating test." It was unusual. I conducted it from a tree in the Barrington tops, and he had to scramble and come out and do this and do that and do the other thing. I was just imagining to myself, if you just got a squadron pilot and said, "This is your instrument rating test," it had given you the bird and told you to get real. But Kells had to go out there and do it in real time to save our lives.
Amazing. So what then happened? The Iroquois in the paddock.
So eventually a ground party of police and some local farmers with the pararescueman from the National Safety Council, whose name was Phil Peel, I think they found Brendan first. So the National Safety Council King Air was flying overhead, and Hezzo was pooping off his pen flares to try to indicate his position. Now, that was never going to work at that height, but just by luck, people were driving nearby, saw the pen flare, found Hezzo. Hezzo said, well, Rhino's over there. And they managed to make their way to me in a police Land Cruiser, I think it was. So a couple of farmers, policemen, and Phil Peel turn up.
So you were close to a track, were you, by luck?
Only, I reckon, let me try to think what the distance would have been. Less than 600 metres from the Gloucester to Glenbourne Road.
Right.
And it's quite close to the Devil's, if anyone's ever going up that way, the Devil's Hole lookout. And Brendan had ended up in the Devil's Hole camping ground.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, by luck, relatively close to a track, although the Land Cruiser easily made its way through the last 600 metres. And then they built themselves a bush ladder. So they cut down three junior tree. What do you call a small tree? Sapling. Essentially a sapling. Stripped it. One of the saplings, they cut notches into it for steps. And the two other saplings, they used as side braces. And they lay the step sapling up against the tree up towards me, put the two side ones on, and then he had the winch cable from the police vehicle over his shoulder, and Phil Peel climbed up this sapling, which to me looked as skinny as a broomstick. I mean, it was probably wider than that, but I'm looking down. I thought, they're not thinking that I'm going to climb down this, are they? Because I've been up the tree now for...
Yeah.
By the time they found me, I think I'd been in the tree for 4 hours.
Wow.
And so... Anyway, so Phil climbed up the ladder and they put the winch cable up on around a branch higher than me. And then I got the clip of that and attached it to the G suit and then had to step out into space, and they winched me down to the ground.
That was innovative.
Even just stepping out and hoping that, I'd clipped everything on strongly enough and stuff like that. It's quite the event. And I'm going, okay, please don't everything fail now. But it worked a treat. So... that was that.
That was very inventive of them too, though, wasn't it? They had a few bush skills, you might say.
I think it was incredible. Yeah.
So then you came down to the ground by a steel rope with a couple of people hanging onto it and letting you down.
Well, it was on a drum on the vehicle.
Oh, it was on the vehicle. Okay.
Yeah, it was on the police vehicle. So they just had the electric motor winding the winch cable out at an appropriate rate.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here you finally arrive on the ground and you give everyone a big hug.
They put me in it was like a snow toboggan with a big, it was like a big Ugg boot. So leather with a big woolen interior. And they just put me into that and sort of zipped me up and, made me as snug as a bug in a rug, so to speak.
Wow.
But I was still sort of freezing cold. So it took a while before I felt it. Yeah.
Wow, they must carry that as a matter of course then.
Look, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but they certainly had it. And I couldn't tell you whether it came out of the helicopter or whether it was in the police vehicle or I'm just not sure.
So meanwhile, where's Cal's gone and he's on it?
Well, eventually he's gone back, he's found our position, he's done all his work and gone home. Yeah. Gone back to 3 Squadron and said, I wonder if Rhino's going to pass me on my instrument rating test.
Good one. So then, just from there on in, what happened from the in the snug as a bug route?
Yes, they put us into the police vehicle and took us down to the helicopter, which then ferried us down to Williamtown to the base medical centre.
What time of the day was that?
By that stage, it was evening. I reckon by the time we got to the helicopter, it felt like dusk. Oh. Yeah, and I think from memory, it took them about an hour to get me out of the tree. I think I'd been in the tree for 5 hours. So it would have been 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on a winter's afternoon. And I think by the time we got to Williamtown, it was dark.
Wow. Would be good to have a reunion with all those guys, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. Yep.
So so you got to the hospital at Williamtown and then you had proper medical treatment.
Yeah, they sent us off to the John Hunter for X-rays, and I don't know if they had MRIs in those days, but just to check our backs out and all that sort of stuff. So we did that night from memory. and then back to base medical flight for another 4 or 5 days, and they sent a HS748 up to Williamtown, which took me down to the RAF base at East Sale on the Friday.
So have you had any reflections about how you handled, I mean, you handled it really well in the sense of keeping your presence of mind and keeping yourself on a conscious path. Have you had any reflections on how important that is for if you're talking to people who may end up in similar situations? What would you tell them about the need for conscious and deliberate thought and actions?
I've sometimes thought that perhaps I'm a bit of a cold fish. I don't get too passionate or emotional about stuff as a general statement. So, and part of that's just the training. I mean, you've been in the Air Force for long enough, from your very first times in an aeroplane, people are, practicing engine failures and practicing this and practicing that and expecting you to be able to solve problems and work your way through checklists and so forth. And I suppose it makes you a bit like that. And having ejected, I feel as if I did everything pretty well right. So I've been pretty happy with the decision-making process and, the actual process that I brought to it and the training that I'd had to do that.
Well, the outcomes would justify your handling of the emergency, because it could have ended up in many different outcomes, but the outcome was right.
Yeah. Yep.
And you don't think Kel's got enough pats on the back?
I no. Every time I tell you, the more he tells me about it, if we discuss it, some other little factoid comes out, and I go, "Wow!" And I try to put myself in his situation. I do think it was an extraordinary feat of airmanship that really deserved more accolades. But Kells just wouldn't say much about it. And then if you grill him, oh yeah, well I had to do this and this. And oh, wow, truly, it's quite the thing.
So if you're now you've now spent a long time on aircraft with ejection seats, what's your reflection on, because I know in my career I contemplated didn't contemplate, I was in an ejection seat just about 90%, 80% of my career. And I always felt like it was there for me. But when the time comes to actually make it yours and use it, is that you've already described it. It's a bit hard to pull the handle because you're wondering whether you buggered it up in the first place. But is there any other reflection you might offer to people who fly around in ejection seats every day?
Well, if it does happen to you, and of course I had a bit of time, so I could have a bit of reflection on that. But for the other people, you probably just won't believe it's happening.
Yeah.
But it is happening.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. There'll be a sense of, I can't believe this is happening, but sadly you can't. A lot of people won't have the time to reflect upon it or anything. You've got to act now.
Yeah, but it's good to have a little look later and cement a few things in other people's minds about how they should respond. And you've done that already with this chat with me, but it's an interesting thing. So anything else you want to add before I say goodbye to you?
I suppose there is one thing, in that era of we had 4 guys sent to fighters and another guy from our academy course. So we had 4 ejections and 1 killed in a mid-air collision.
Really?
Yep. And it was just, and the bizarre thing was, we thought it was normal, and to a certain extent, it was a bit normal, in that era. And I just think the Air Force today is just such a more capable, safe, fabulous organisation. And I know Mel was interviewed about this, and he talked about just how much better they're doing things. And of course, they've been to operations and all sorts of things. With just what is an incredible safety record compared to when in those 1980s.
Yeah, yeah, and you can write it down to I think changes in aeroplanes and changes in equipment and changes in the way you treat things. But I still think way back, which I was in the same era as you, when people were ejecting frequently and maybe you could even say a lot of deaths in your life, that it wasn't due to the pilot being slack or being ineffective. It was more due to that time in history.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to meet you, and it's nice to hear your story. I think it's a beauty.
Okay, thanks, Ringo.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales, and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.